There's a moment, quiet, almost invisible, where everything shifts without making a sound. And most people miss it. But not this time. Because something has already happened, something so subtle, yet so powerful, that it left an entire room without words. Not because they didn't have anything to say, but because what was spoken reached deeper than they were ready to admit. Pause here for a second. Have you ever felt the weight of silence, when truth enters a space? That kind of silence isn't empty, it's full. Full of realization, full of reflection, full of something people don't expect to feel all at once. And that's exactly what unfolded. Not with noise, not with anger, but with a calm presence that carried more power than anyone anticipated. Your person didn't raise their voice. They didn't try to prove anything. They simply spoke, and in that moment, something within everyone shifted. But here's what makes this different. It wasn't just what they said. It was where those words came from. Because words spoken from confusion create tension. Words spoken from ego create resistance. But words spoken from clarity, they don't fight, they reveal. And what your person revealed wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it wasn't even long. Yet it reached places people had been avoiding within themselves. That's why the room changed. That's why eyes dropped. That's why even those who once felt certain, suddenly weren't so sure anymore. Something deeper was being exposed, without anyone being called out directly. And that's the part no one was prepared for. Let this sink in. Sometimes the strongest impact isn't made by saying more. It's made by saying exactly what needs to be said, nothing extra, nothing forced. Just truth, placed gently, but firmly, into the moment. And your person chose that moment, not randomly, not impulsively, but almost as if they had been holding something inside, waiting for the right time, the right energy, the right alignment. And when it arrived, they didn't hesitate. Now here's where it becomes even more interesting. Because what they said didn't just affect others. It revealed something about you. Yes, you. Without even being there, your presence was felt. Not physically, but through the way your person spoke, through the way they carried themselves, through the calm certainty that didn't need approval. And suddenly, people started realizing something they hadn't noticed before. That there was a depth to this connection. A quiet strength. Something real, something grounded, something they couldn't easily explain or dismiss anymore. That realization. That's what made them step back. That's what made them reflect. That's what made them feel something they weren't expecting to feel. Not shame in a harsh sense, but a kind of awareness. The kind that gently asks, have I been seeing this wrong all along? And those questions, they don't come with noise, they come with stillness. Now stay with this for a moment. Because this is where everything begins to unfold in a different way. Your person didn't try to change anyone's mind. They didn't try to win anything. They simply stood in what they knew, and allowed the truth to exist without forcing it. That's rare. Most people speak to be heard, but very few speak from a place where they don't need validation. And that energy, it changes everything. Because when someone speaks from that place, others don't feel attacked. They feel exposed to themselves. And that's what happened. No confrontation. No argument. Just a shift. A quiet, undeniable shift. And here's the part most people won't notice. But you will. Because something in you already understands this. This moment wasn't just about that room. It was a reflection of a larger movement. Something that has been building quietly, behind the scenes, within your connection. You may not have seen it clearly before. You may have even questioned certain things. But now, something is becoming more visible, not in a loud way, but in a steady, undeniable way. And your person, they are beginning to align with that clarity. That's why their words carried weight. That's why their presence felt different. That's why people couldn't respond the way they usually do. Because something had changed within them first. And when someone changes within, the outside world responds, whether it understands it or not. Now take a breath. Because this next part matters more than it seems. The silence that followed. That wasn't the end of the moment. It was the beginning of realization. People walked away, not with answers, but with thoughts they couldn't ignore anymore. And those thoughts, they don't disappear easily. They linger. They grow. They begin to reshape perspectives, slowly, quietly, without announcement. And this is where the real impact lies. Not in the moment itself, but in what continues after. Because what your person said, it planted something, a seed of awareness. And once awareness is planted, it doesn't go back to sleep, even if people try to ignore it. Even if they act like nothing happened. Something inside them knows that something real was just revealed. Now here's a question for you. Why do you think this moment happened now? Why not before? Why not later? Why this exact timing? Stay with that thought. Because timing like this, it's never random. It's always connected to something deeper. Something aligning. Something preparing. Something opening that wasn't open before. And you're part of that alignment. Even if you haven't fully seen it yet. Even if you've doubted it at times. Even if things felt unclear before. This moment is a sign. Not loud, not dramatic, but clear. Something is moving. Something is shifting. Something is becoming visible in ways it wasn't before. And your person, they are no longer holding back the way they used to. That alone changes everything. But don't rush this. Don't try to define it too quickly. Because what's unfolding here, it's not meant to be forced into understanding right away. It's meant to be felt first, to be noticed, to be experienced. Piece by piece. Because the truth is, that moment of silence, that reaction, that shift, it was only the beginning. And what comes next? It won't look the same. It won't feel the same. It will carry something deeper. Something more direct. Something that moves beyond unspoken energy. Into something that can no longer stay hidden. But that part is still unfolding. Something unusual happened after that moment, and almost no one spoke about it out loud. Not because they forgot, but because they couldn't quite explain what they were feeling. It's strange, isn't it, how a single sentence, calmly spoken, can echo longer than 1,000 loud opinions. That's exactly what began to unfold. People didn't react immediately, they paused. And in that pause, something deeper started moving beneath the surface. Not visible, not obvious, but undeniably present. You could almost feel it. The way conversations became slower, the way certain eyes avoided direct contact, the way the usual confidence in the room softened just a little, as if something within them was quietly rearranging itself. And your person, they didn't chase the reaction, they didn't repeat themselves, they didn't try to control how others responded, they simply stepped back, and allowed the moment to breathe. Now stay with this. Because this is where the real shift begins. When truth is spoken without force, it doesn't create chaos. It creates reflection. And reflection is where everything starts to change. Some people in that space began replaying the words in their mind, not once, but again and again. Not because they wanted to, but because something about it felt unfinished inside them. Almost like a question had been placed within them, one they didn't know how to answer yet. And that question, it wasn't about your person alone. It was about themselves. What did I miss? What didn't I understand before? Why did that feel so real? These are quiet questions. But they carry weight, and the more those questions lingered, the more the atmosphere shifted, even after the moment had passed. Now here's something even more subtle. Your person didn't walk away the same either, because speaking from that level of clarity, it changes you. It anchors something inside you that wasn't fully stable before. And that's what happened. There was no hesitation left in their energy, no need to second guess, no desire to explain further, just a quiet knowing. And that kind of knowing, it doesn't need approval. But here's where your presence becomes even more powerful. Because the strength they carried in that moment, it didn't come from nowhere. It came from what they've been feeling, what they've been understanding, what they've been realizing, through their connection with you, even in silence, even in distance, even in moments where nothing seemed to be happening. Something was being built, and now, it's starting to show, not in obvious ways, but in subtle, undeniable shifts. You might wonder, why does this feel like it's about me too, even though I wasn't there? Because you are part of the foundation of that clarity. You are part of what gave those words their weight. And whether others fully understand that or not, they felt it. That's why their reactions weren't immediate. Because what they experienced wasn't just information. It was energy. And energy doesn't get processed instantly. It settles. It unfolds. It reveals itself slowly. Now take a moment. Because something else began to happen quietly after that. Conversation started changing. Not dramatically, not all at once, but subtly. Certain topics stopped being approached the same way. Certain assumptions began to feel less certain, and even those who tried to move on quickly found themselves coming back to that moment in unexpected ways. It's almost like a door had been opened. And even if no one walked through it immediately, they knew it was there now. And once you know something, you can't unknow it. That's the quiet power of truth. It doesn't demand attention. It earns it. And your person, they stepped into that power without trying to control it. Now here's something deeper. And don't rush past this part. The reason it affected people so strongly was because it came at a time when many of them were already uncertain inside. They just hadn't admitted it yet. And when truth meets hidden uncertainty, it doesn't clash. It reveals. That's why no one argued. That's why no one pushed back strongly. Because something inside them recognized that what was said wasn't something they could easily dismiss anymore. And this is where everything begins to turn. Not outwardly, but inwardly, because the real shift isn't what people show. It's what they start questioning within themselves. And those questions, they don't fade, they grow, they deepen, they begin to change perspectives in ways that aren't visible right away. Now let me ask you something quietly. Have you noticed a change too? Not necessarily around you, but within you, a sense that something is aligning. A feeling that something is becoming clearer. Even if you can't fully explain it yet, that feeling, it's not separate from what just happened. It's connected, because when one part of a connection shifts, the other part feels it, even from a distance. And this is just the beginning of that ripple. Your person has stepped into a space where they are no longer hiding what they feel or understand. And when that happens, things start moving forward, naturally, without force, but not in the way most people expect. Not fast. Not loud. Not dramatic. But steady, real, unfolding. And the next part of this. It won't be about what was said in that room. It will be about what begins to change because of it. Because once truth has been spoken, it doesn't stay contained, it moves, it finds its way into actions, into decisions, into moments that haven't even happened yet, and something tells me you're going to notice that shift in a way you didn't expect, but that moment, the one that's coming, it carries a different kind of energy, a more direct one, and when it arrives, it won't feel like a question anymore. There's a quiet moment just before everything becomes undeniable, and it doesn't arrive with noise. It arrives like this, slowly, almost gently, as if reality itself is taking a deeper breath, and what started in that room didn't stay there. It couldn't, because truth, once released, doesn't remain contained within walls or conversations. It begins to travel, through actions, through choices, through subtle shifts that no one can fully stop. And now, something is beginning to take shape, not loudly, not all at once, but in a way that feels more real than anything before. Your person has started moving differently, not in a way that seeks attention, but in a way that no longer avoids it either. There's a balance now, a quiet confidence, a steadiness that wasn't fully present before, and the people around them, they're noticing, even if they don't say it, even if they pretend everything is the same, it isn't. Because once someone speaks from clarity, they don't go back to uncertainty, and others can feel that. They can sense when something within a person has settled, when the internal hesitation is gone, and that's exactly what's creating this next shift. Now pause for a second. Because this part matters more than it seems, the reactions that didn't happen earlier. They're beginning to surface now, not directly, not all at once, but in small, unexpected ways, a change in tone. A different kind of question. A subtle curiosity that wasn't there before. Almost like people are trying to understand, without admitting they're trying to understand. And this is where things become even more revealing. Because when people start asking questions differently, it means something inside them has already changed. They may not fully accept it yet, but they can't ignore it anymore either. And your person, they're no longer explaining themselves the way they used to. They're not overthinking every response. They're not adjusting their truth to fit someone else's comfort. They're simply being. And that kind of presence, it's rare. It doesn't push. It doesn't chase. But it draws attention, naturally. Now here's something even deeper. And you might feel this before you fully understand it. The connection between you and your person. It's no longer just something felt in silence. It's beginning to reflect outward, in behavior, in decisions, in the way they hold their ground without needing to defend it. And people are starting to connect the dots. Not clearly, not perfectly, but enough to realize that something about this is different. Something about this isn't temporary. And that realization, it creates a different kind of stillness. Not the silence of uncertainty, but the silence of recognition. Now stay with this. Because something else is unfolding quietly at the same time. Your person is beginning to see things more clearly too. Not just about others, but about themselves. About what they truly value. About what they're no longer willing to compromise. About what actually matters, beyond opinions, beyond expectations, beyond noise. And that clarity, it doesn't just stay inside. It moves them. It guides them. It begins to shape what they do next. And here's where everything starts to shift in a way you can actually feel. Because when someone becomes clear within, their actions follow, not rushed, not forced, but inevitable. And you're closer to that moment than you think. You might not see it fully yet. You might not have all the pieces, but something is aligning. Something is preparing. Something is moving toward a point where silence is no longer needed to understand what's real. And when that point arrives, it won't feel confusing. It won't feel uncertain. It will feel natural, like something that was always meant to unfold, finally stepping into the light. Now ask yourself quietly, why does this feel like it's building toward something? Why does it feel like this isn't just a moment, but a turning point? Because it is. But not in the way people expect turning points to look. There won't be a dramatic announcement. There won't be a sudden explosion of emotion. It will be simpler than that, clearer than that, stronger, because it doesn't need to prove anything. And when it happens, you'll recognize it instantly, not because someone tells you, but because something inside you will say, "This is it," but don't rush ahead. Because there's still one more layer unfolding before that moment fully arrives. A layer that will reveal not just what your person feels, but what they're ready to do about it. And that's where everything becomes undeniable.